Did you know that at one point God forced the land of Israel to rest? We're going to talk about that today, and we're going to talk about how we as Christians can enter into God's rest for us. So this is day 3 of these devotions that we've been doing for Radiant Church, and it's obviously a really crazy season, and we're just hoping that as more people are staying home, that this is a blessing to all of us, and it's an encouragement for us to get in the Word and abide in Jesus. So, like I said, believe it or not, there was a time when God forced the land of Israel to rest. So the backstory is when Israel first became a nation with Moses, he gave them a set of laws, and one of the laws in the book of Leviticus actually said that if they disobeyed him for a long period of time, specifically his law to keep a Sabbath 1 year for every 7 years would be a Sabbath year, that he would send them into exile and he would force the land to rest. So this is what the passage says from Leviticus. He says, "Then the land will enjoy its Sabbath years." This is once they're in exile under the judgment of God. "It'll enjoy its Sabbath years all the time that it lies desolate, and you are in the country of your enemies. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. All the time that it lies desolate, the land will have the rest it did not have during the Sabbaths you lived in it." So fast forward about 1,000 years forward, and that's exactly what happened. Israel disobeyed for a long period of time. God sent them into exile into Babylon for exactly 70 years. And the reason he gave to the prophets like Jeremiah was that he gave them one forced year of Sabbath, each one of those 70 years, for the 490 years that they didn't take those years of Sabbaths off. So I'm not saying that that is a parallel to what's happening right now in our society with things shutting down and this whole coronavirus scare, but I am saying that there's a principle that when a people or a society refuses to rest in the way that God's ordained, that sometimes God makes us rest. Okay, it's kind of like Psalm 23 verse 2, where David said, "He makes me lie down in green pastures." So let's talk about how we as believers can voluntarily choose to enter into the rest of God. So before though, I want to read this just interesting quote. It's from this book right here, Philip Yancey's book on prayer. And so this is Philip Yancey, and he's going to talk about a story about Thomas Merton. When a journalist asked Thomas Merton to diagnose the leading spiritual disease of our time, the monk gave a curious one-word answer: efficiency. He asked him why efficiency would be the spiritual disease of his time. And Merton answered, "From the monastery to the Pentagon, the plant has to run, and there is little time or energy left over after that to do anything else." So what Thomas Merton was saying was that efficiency can become a god in and of itself. And everything a society or even the church does is serving this god of efficiency, where everything has to run perfectly, as planned, cleanly, diligently. And sometimes there's no room for anything else afterwards, including intimacy with God, which is where we find rest in God. So now we get to our main passage here from Hebrews, where it talks about the rest that Christians can enter into. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 9 through 11 says, "There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience." I believe that taking days off to rest, Sabbaths, is still very important, but the focus here and in the New Testament is that we live a lifestyle of rest where we're pausing, continually to commune with God, like we've talked about in these devotions, to abide in him, to pray blessings of peace over ourselves. 1 Peter also says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. And that's part of how we enter into this rest. So God's going to get us to rest one way or another, but I want to encourage us today to choose to enter into the rest of his presence. We got to make every effort to enter the rest, like Hebrews says. We have to cast all our anxiety on him because he cares for us. And if we do, then like that Psalm 23 verse, we're going to be able to lie down in those green pastures of his presence.